Rain had been falling for hours, the kind that blurred the edges of the world and made the city feel like a fading memory. Inside their small apartment, the protagonist sat at the kitchen table, staring at the same chipped coffee mug they'd used for years. Bills were scattered in front of them, unopened, like landmines waiting for the wrong step. It wasn't just money that felt tight. It was life. Every day felt eerily identical: wake up, rush to work, come home exhausted, scroll through other people's lives online, then sleep just enough to do it all over again. The days stacked on top of each other like bricks, and somewhere along the way, the bricks had formed walls. They tried to shake it off. Everyone feels this way sometimes, they told themselves. But a faint unease curled in their stomach, a quiet dread they couldn't name. That night, unable to sleep, they walked through the rain to a small convenience store. As they were leaving, they noticed a figure leaning against the wall outside. A stranger, half hidden under a hood, smoking slowly. "You look like you're trying to escape something," the stranger said, their voice low but cutting through the rain. The protagonist hesitated. "I'm fine." The stranger tilted their head, a faint smile playing on their lips. "It's not your life that's trapped, it's your mind." Before they could respond, a gust of wind scattered a nearby pile of flyers, and when they looked back, the stranger was gone. Hours later, still rattled, they returned home. The apartment was silent, except for the dripping of the kitchen faucet. They went to the bathroom to wash their face, and as the mirror cleared from steam, their pulse quickened. Scrawled in dark red marker across the glass, "Mindset 1 is already in you." Sleep didn't come easy after the mirror incident. They kept replaying the words, "Mindset 1 is already in you," trying to tell themselves it was a prank. Maybe a leftover note from an old roommate. But deep down, they knew it wasn't. The next morning, they found themselves drawn to the top shelf of their closet, where a battered cardboard box had been collecting dust for years. It wasn't marked, but they knew exactly what was inside. The box contained an old leather-bound journal, the one they'd bought when they were finally going to start their dream project. They hadn't opened it in years. Flipping through the first few pages felt like opening a time capsule of hope. Lists of goals. Sketches of ideas. Motivational quotes copied from books. But as they kept turning pages, something began to feel wrong. Every entry seemed to end the same way: "I'll start tomorrow." It was there in January, in March, in July, every year. In different handwriting styles, different moods, but always the same promise. They turned faster now, pages slapping against each other, and realized that tomorrow had stretched on for 7 years. Their chest tightened. They wanted to slam the journal shut, to shove it back into the box and pretend it didn't exist. But a strange compulsion made them flip to the very back. The last page had no date. The handwriting was unfamiliar, sharper, almost deliberate. Just one sentence: "This is how we keep you here." They dropped the journal. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed in the small room, louder than it should have been. And in that moment, they couldn't tell if it meant other people or something already living inside them. They needed to get out of their apartment, away from the journal, away from the silence. So they called an old friend, someone they hadn't seen in months. They met at a small corner cafe, the kind that smelled like burnt coffee and nostalgia. At first, the conversation was light, old memories, mutual complaints about the city. But soon, it shifted. Their friend was talking about a career opportunity, something life-changing. But every time they tried to offer input, the friend cut them off. No, I know how it works," the friend said with a wave of their hand. Every suggestion was met with the same dismissive tone: "I already know. I already know." And somewhere between the third and fourth interruption, something sharp pierced through the protagonist's frustration, a realization. They had been that person, too. For years, they could see flashes of their own past conversations, rolling their eyes when someone tried to teach them something, assuming advice didn't apply because they'd heard it before. How many doors had quietly closed because they couldn't shut up and listen? The coffee had gone cold when their friend checked their phone and muttered, "I've got to go." No goodbye hug, just a distracted wave. The chair screeched against the floor as they left. The protagonist sat in the empty booth for a long time, staring at the crumbs on the table. When they finally picked up their own phone, there was a new email notification. No sender name. No profile picture. Just a subject line: "We taught you to think this way." They didn't open it. They couldn't. Not yet. For days, the email sat unopened in their inbox like a live wire they were afraid to touch. They buried themselves in routine instead, same alarm, same breakfast, same commute. At first, it felt safer. Predictable. But once the thought had been planted, they couldn't stop noticing. In the office break room, someone sighed about how much they hated their job, before launching into a story about the same show they watched every night. At lunch, a coworker complained about their health, then unwrapped the same greasy sandwich they ate daily. Even their friends followed scripts. I'd love to travel someday, I really should learn that, next year for sure. It was everywhere. The same excuses, polished smooth from years of repetition. The realization unsettled them. Comfort wasn't just a warm blanket, it was a padded cell. And everyone they knew was decorating their own cell with the same posters, the same coffee mugs, the same dreams they'd never act on. That night, they met with an old mentor, someone they still respected. They told them everything about the stranger in the rain, the journal, the email they hadn't opened. The mentor listened quietly, then leaned forward. You think comfort is your friend, they said. But the moment you try to leave, something in you will resist. Hard. The words lingered long after they left the meeting. They walked home in the cold night air, hands shoved in their pockets, trying to convince themselves it was an exaggeration. But when they got to their apartment and reached for their doorknob, a strange chill ran up their arm, a sudden, irrational thought, don't go in. They pushed it away and stepped inside. The lights flickered. The flickering lights hadn't stopped them from getting back to work. If anything, they worked harder. Every waking hour became a checklist, emails, errands, meetings, tasks stacked like bricks in a wall they couldn't see over. If they could just keep moving, they wouldn't have to think about the mirror, the journal, the mentor's warning. It became a blur. Morning coffee in one hand, phone in the other. Lunch eaten over spreadsheets. Night spent answering messages under the cold glow of the laptop screen. People praised them for it. You're killing it, coworkers said. You're so dedicated, friends remarked. But beneath the compliments was exhaustion so deep it felt like their bones were tired. Then came the opportunity, a rare one. A project they dreamed about for years, suddenly within reach. They had the skills. They had the connections. And for a fleeting moment, they had the energy. But something in them stalled. They missed the first meeting, too busy catching up on smaller tasks. They delayed sending a crucial email, telling themselves they'd do it after finishing. When they could have changed course but clung to excuses. Each memory revealed a choice they had refused to make, and with every one, the heavy weight of responsibility pressed down harder. Playing the victim had been a secret throne, comfortable and familiar, even if it was built on pain. It fed their ego, gave them identity, and justified inaction. One evening, during a rare honest moment with someone close, a whispered truth slipped out, barely audible, but shattering. We all chose this prison. The words echoed louder than anything they'd heard before. The whispered words haunted them as they dug deeper. It wasn't enough to identify the mindsets, they needed to know where they came from. Late nights became their battleground, scouring old family photos, rereading childhood diaries, and replaying conversations with a new, suspicious lens. Pieces started falling into place, a phrase their parents repeated, a warning disguised as advice from teachers. The subtle patterns in their workplace's culture. These weren't random influences. They were carefully planted scripts, designed to keep them predictable, compliant, and safe. A chilling realization emerged, the very people and systems they trusted the most, family, culture, job, were the architects of their prison. Then came the memory. A vivid flashback of a childhood moment, but something was off. Faces blurred. Words they swore they remembered were now distorted. It was as if someone had rewritten the past, smudged the lines between truth and illusion. The walls around them felt tighter. If their memories could be altered, what else was controlled? And more frighteningly, who was behind it all? Determined not to be a prisoner any longer, they started small, replacing the poisoned mindsets with fresh perspectives, tiny acts of rebellion against years of conditioning. They said no when they wanted to say yes. They chose discomfort over routine, uncertainty over safety. For a while, life sparkled with new possibilities. Friends noticed the change, some cheered, others pulled away, unsettled by the shift. But beneath the surface, something dark stirred. Late at night, restless and exhausted, they found themselves jolted awake by the sensation of being watched. In their dreams, a shadowy figure lurked in the corner of every room, a familiar silhouette, but distorted, fragmented. It didn't speak, but its presence was undeniable. With every step forward, the shadow grew stronger, as if feeding on their defiance. By day, the internal voice whispered doubts and fears, tugging them back towards safety and silence. Freedom was no longer just a goal, it was a battleground. The dreams no longer ended when they woke. Shadows clung to the edges of their vision, at work, on the train, in the reflection of passing windows. At first they dismissed it as exhaustion, but the figure was too precise, too deliberate. Then one night, the shadow stepped forward. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't even a monster. It was them. Same face. Same voice. Same subtle tilt of the head, but darker, sharper, more certain. "I'm not your enemy," the shadow said. "I'm your protection. I've kept you safe. I kept you from failure, from embarrassment, from rejection." Every mindset, every excuse, every delay, it wasn't just conditioning. It was the shadow's design. "You think you've been fighting the world," it whispered, leaning closer. "But you've only ever been fighting me. And I am you." The words sank in like poison. The 5 mindsets weren't habits to break. They were threads woven into their identity. The shadow smiled, a perfect mirror of their own lips. "You'll kill me, and then what will be left of you?" The night was silent, heavy, as if the world itself held its breath. They stood in their apartment, lights off, curtains drawn, facing the figure that wore their face. The shadow no longer hid in corners. It sat casually on the couch, legs crossed. "You're here to kill me," it said, voice calm, almost amused. "But remember, I'm not just in you. I am you." The air crackled with a strange energy, as though thought itself had become a weapon. Every doubt, every fear, every excuse they'd ever held onto swirled in the room, pressing against them like invisible hands. They shouted back, voice raw, "You're the reason I'm stuck. You've chained me, suffocated me." The shadow only smirked. "No. I've protected you. Without me, you'll be naked. Vulnerable. You'll stumble, you'll fail. Do you really think you can live without me?" The room warped, memories flashing on the walls like a broken projector, every missed chance, every abandoned dream, every conversation cut short by, "I already know." It was unbearable. Then, a choice crystallized: destroy the shadow and risk tearing themselves apart, or let it live and remain bound forever. They stepped forward. The air trembled. A scream, a shatter, a silence. When it was over, they stood alone. Breathing hard. Shaking. But in the reflection of the darkened window, their eyes caught a flicker, a glint too sharp, too familiar. Had they won? Or had the shadow simply tricked them into believing they had? The silence gave no answer.